I'm so glad you're here with us today. We're diving deep into A Course in Miracles, and if you're just joining our community, you might be wondering what this course is all about. I'd love to invite you to check out the very first video on this channel, where I break down exactly what A Course in Miracles is, how it came to exist, and why it's been transforming lives for over 5 decades. It'll give you the perfect foundation for everything we explore together here. Now, let me ask you something. When you hear the word judgment, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's not a pleasant feeling, is it? We think of being criticized, evaluated, found lacking. We think of that sinking sensation when someone looks at us with disapproval. We think of the voice in our own head that never seems to stop telling us we're not enough. We've made too many mistakes. We've gone too far to turn back now. Judgment feels heavy. It feels final. It feels like a door closing rather than opening. And yet, here we are in Chapter 12 of A Course in Miracles, in a section called The Judgment of the Holy Spirit. At first glance, this might seem like a contradiction. How can the Holy Spirit, which the Course describes as the voice for love, the bridge back to God, the healer of all separation, how can this presence of pure compassion have anything to do with judgment? Isn't judgment the very thing that keeps us trapped in guilt and fear? Isn't judgment what the ego uses to attack ourselves and others? Here's where the Course begins to turn everything we thought we knew upside down. What if judgment isn't inherently about condemnation? What if there's a way of seeing, a way of discerning, that doesn't attack but liberates? What if the problem isn't judgment itself, but whose voice is doing the judging? You see, every single day, every single moment, you are making judgments. You're deciding what things mean. You're interpreting your experiences. You're choosing how to see. The person in front of you, the situation you're facing, the thought that just crossed your mind. This is unavoidable. This is part of being human. The question isn't whether you will judge. You will. The question is, which teacher are you learning from? Which interpretation are you accepting as true? The ego has a curriculum. It teaches you to judge through the lens of separation, attack, and fear. It shows you a world of guilty people who deserve punishment, including yourself. It presents evidence of wrongdoing everywhere you look. And its final lesson is always the same. You are alone, you are unsafe, and love is dangerous. But the Holy Spirit has a different curriculum entirely. And in today's exploration, we're going to understand what it means when the Holy Spirit judges. We're going to discover that this judgment doesn't condemn, it corrects. It doesn't attack, it heals. It doesn't separate, it reunites. This is the judgment that sets you free rather than binding you in chains of guilt. If you've been carrying the weight of self-judgment, if you've been exhausted by the constant evaluation and criticism that runs through your mind, if you've been afraid of what you might find if you really look at yourself honestly, this message is for you. Because the Holy Spirit's judgment sees something in you that the ego will never show you. It sees your innocence. It sees your wholeness. It sees the truth about who you really are beneath all the layers of fear and guilt and shame. Today, we're going to explore how judgment can become an instrument of healing rather than harm. We're going to understand what the Course means by the last judgment, and why it's not something to fear, but something to welcome. And we're going to learn how to apply this different kind of seeing in your everyday life, in your relationships, in those moments when you're faced with a choice between the ego's condemnation and the Holy Spirit's truth. So take a breath. Let yourself be open. You're exactly where you need to be. Let's begin. Let me tell you about two voices that are constantly speaking in your mind. You've heard them both so many times that you might not even notice them anymore. But they're there, always offering you their interpretation of everything you experience. And here's what you need to understand. These two voices have completely opposite goals. The first voice is the ego. And the ego's form of judgment is the one you know all too well. It's the voice that wakes up with you in the morning and immediately starts the evaluation process. Did you sleep too late? You're lazy. Did you snap at someone yesterday? You're a terrible person. Did that person not text you back? They must think you're worthless. The ego's judgment is relentless, harsh, and always looking for evidence of guilt, in you and in everyone around you. Here's how the ego's judgment operates. It starts with the belief in separation. It tells you that you are fundamentally separate from others, separate from God, alone in a hostile universe. And from this foundational lie, everything else follows. If you're separate, then you're in competition. If you're in competition, then someone has to win and someone has to lose. If there are winners and losers, then judgment becomes a weapon, a way to elevate yourself by diminishing others, or a way to punish yourself for not measuring up. The ego judges to attack. It uses judgment to maintain division, to reinforce guilt, to keep you trapped in fear. When the ego looks at you, it sees your mistakes, your failures, your unworthiness. When it looks at others, it sees threats, competitors, people who have wronged you or might wrong you in the future. The ego's judgment always leads to the same place: more separation, more fear, more pain, and the cruelest part? The ego convinces you that this harsh judgment is necessary. It tells you that without constant evaluation and criticism, you'll become complacent, you'll fail, you'll be hurt. It makes you believe that attack is defense and that guilt is somehow keeping you safe. But then there's the other voice, the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit's judgment is something entirely different, so different that it barely deserves the same word. The Holy Spirit doesn't judge to condemn. The Holy Spirit judges to discern, to separate truth from illusion, reality from fantasy, love from fear. When the Holy Spirit looks at you, it sees past every mistake you've ever made, every fearful thought you've ever had, every moment of weakness or confusion. It sees the truth of who you are, innocent, whole, and loved beyond measure. This is the judgment that heals. The Holy Spirit looks at the same situations the ego looks at, but it sees them through the lens of love rather than fear. Where the ego sees guilt, the Holy Spirit sees a call for love. Where the ego sees attack, the Holy Spirit sees fear, asking to be comforted. Where the ego sees separation, the Holy Spirit sees the opportunity for joining. The Holy Spirit's judgment doesn't divide, it unites. It doesn't attack, it extends. It doesn't reinforce your illusions, it gently shows you the truth that sets you free. This is the judgment that recognizes your innocence even when you can't see it yourself. This is the judgment that says, you are not what you think you are. You are so much more. So here's the fundamental choice you're making in every moment. Which voice will you listen to? Which interpretation will you accept? The ego's judgment that binds you in guilt and fear, or the Holy Spirit's judgment that recognizes the truth and sets you free? This isn't just philosophical theory. This is the choice that determines whether you experience peace or conflict, love or fear, freedom or imprisonment in this very moment. Now, let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable at first. Let's talk about the Last Judgment. For many of us, those words carry enormous weight. If you grew up with religious teaching, you might have images in your mind of a final day of reckoning, of standing before God to be evaluated for every sin, every mistake, every thought you ever had. You might imagine a cosmic courtroom where your life is weighed on scales, where some are saved and others are condemned for eternity. The Last Judgment, in traditional teaching, is often presented as the ultimate moment of fear, the day when all your hidden guilt is exposed and you finally get what you deserve. But Course in Miracles is about to completely transform your understanding of what the Last Judgment actually means. And I promise you, this is not what you've been taught to fear. The Course tells us that the Last Judgment is not God's condemnation of you. It's your final decision against illusion. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't about God judging you. This is about you finally choosing to see the truth instead of the lies you've been believing. Think about it this way. You've been living in a dream. In this dream, you've convinced yourself that you're separate from your source, that you're guilty, that you're small and limited and vulnerable. You've built an entire identity based on these beliefs. You've judged yourself harshly. You've judged others. You've seen a world of attack and defense, scarcity and competition. This is the ego's world, and you've been accepting it as reality. The Last Judgment is the moment when you finally say, "No more. I will not believe this anymore." It's the final decision to reject every false thought, every illusion of separation, every belief in guilt and punishment. It's when you choose once and for all to accept only the truth about yourself and everyone else. This is why the Course says the Last Judgment is one of the most hopeful concepts in its entire thought system. Because it's not about being condemned, it's about being set free. It's about the end of judgment as you've known it, not the beginning of some eternal evaluation. Here's the beautiful paradox. When you truly judge with the Holy Spirit, when you finally see everything through the lens of truth rather than fear, there's nothing left to judge. Because judgment, in the ego's sense, requires separation. It requires someone to be guilty and someone to be innocent, someone to be right and someone to be wrong. But when you see with the Holy Spirit's vision, you recognize that there is only innocence. There is only love, or the call for love. There is only truth, or the invitation to remember truth. The Last Judgment is called last because after it, no more judgment is necessary. Once you've made the final decision to choose truth over illusion, love over fear, unity over separation, what is there left to judge? When you know who you really are, when you remember your true nature as God's perfect creation, judgment becomes meaningless. This isn't something far off in the future. This isn't waiting for you at the end of time. The Last Judgment is available to you right now, in this moment, every time you choose to see through the Holy Spirit's eyes instead of the ego's. Every time you choose to see your brother's innocence instead of his guilt, you're participating in the Last Judgment. Every time you forgive yourself for a perceived mistake and recognize that your true nature remains untouched and pure, you're experiencing what it means to judge finally and correctly. So the question isn't whether the Last Judgment will happen. The question is, are you ready to make it? Are you ready to decide once and for all that the truth about you is true and everything else is just a bad dream you're choosing to wake up from? This is the judgment that ends all judgment. This is the decision that sets you free. So now we come to the most important part, Because understanding these concepts intellectually is one thing, but actually living them, actually applying the Holy Spirit's judgment in your daily life, that's where transformation happens. That's where peace becomes real instead of just an idea. Let me be direct with you. Right now, in this very moment, you are judging falsely. We all are. It's so automatic, so ingrained, that you probably don't even notice it happening. You wake up and judge how you feel. Tired means something's wrong with you. You look in the mirror and judge your appearance. Not good enough. You check your phone and judge the message you received or didn't receive. You go through your day judging every interaction, every outcome, every thought that crosses your mind. And here's the painful truth. Most of this judgment is attack. You're attacking yourself for not being perfect. You're attacking others for not meeting your expectations. You're attacking situations for not going the way you wanted. This constant evaluation and criticism, this is the ego's judgment at work, and it's exhausting you. But you can choose differently, and it starts with one simple practice: recognition. When you notice yourself feeling upset, anxious, angry, or guilty, stop. Just stop for a moment and ask yourself, what judgment am I making right now? What am I telling myself this situation means? What verdict have I reached about myself or another person? Let's make this practical. Imagine someone close to you says something that hurts you. Your immediate reaction is judgment. They're thoughtless. They don't care about me. I'm not important to them. This is the ego's interpretation, and it leads directly to pain, resentment, and separation. Now here's where you have a choice. You can bring this to the Holy Spirit and ask for a different interpretation. You can say, I'm choosing to see this differently. Show me the truth here. And when you genuinely open yourself to this different vision, something remarkable happens. You begin to see that person's fear instead of their attack. You recognize their call for love beneath their words. You remember that their true nature, like yours, is innocent, even when they're acting from fear. This doesn't mean accepting abuse. This doesn't mean pretending hurtful behavior is okay. What it means is recognizing that when someone attacks, they're coming from their own pain, their own fear, their own sense of separation. And that recognition allows you to respond from love rather than react from fear. The same practice applies to how you judge yourself. When you make a mistake, when you fall short of your own expectations, when you do something you regret, the ego rushes in with its verdict: guilty, unworthy, irredeemable. But you can choose the Holy Spirit's judgment instead. You can recognize that a mistake is just a call for correction, not evidence of your unworthiness. You can see that your true innocence remains untouched by anything you've done or failed to do. This is what it means to accept your innocence. Not to deny your humanity, not to pretend you're perfect, but to recognize that beneath every error, every fear, every moment of confusion, your true nature remains pure, whole, and loved. In your relationships, this practice changes everything. Instead of keeping score, you extend grace. Instead of holding grudges, you offer forgiveness. Instead of demanding that others prove their love, you recognize the love that's always been there, waiting to be seen. In moments of conflict, you pause before reacting. You ask the Holy Spirit to show you what's really happening beneath the surface drama, and you choose to see the opportunity for healing rather than the justification for attack. The result? Peace. Not the temporary peace that comes from getting what you want or avoiding what you fear, but the deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing the truth. This is the peace that surpasses understanding. This is what becomes possible when you let the Holy Spirit judge instead of the ego. You are innocent, right now, exactly as you are. That's the truth the Holy Spirit sees. Are you ready to accept it? So here we are. You've learned that judgment doesn't have to be the enemy. You've discovered that the Holy Spirit offers a way of seeing that heals rather than harms, that liberates rather than condemns. You've understood that the last judgment isn't something to fear, but something to embrace. Your final decision to choose truth over illusion. And you've been given the tools to actually apply this in your life, to choose the Holy Spirit's interpretation instead of the ego's attack. But understanding is only the beginning. The real transformation happens when you practice this, when you catch yourself in the act of false judgment and choose again, when you look at yourself with compassion instead of criticism, when you see your brother's innocence even when he can't see it himself. This is the curriculum of the Holy Spirit. This is what it means to learn a different way of being in the world. And yes, it takes practice. Yes, you'll forget and fall back into the ego's patterns. But every time you choose again, every time you ask for the Holy Spirit's vision instead of accepting the ego's verdict, you're strengthening your ability to live in peace. You are innocent, that's the truth. And everything else, every guilty thought, every fearful judgment, every moment of self-attack, is just the ego's attempt to keep you from remembering who you really are. If this message touched something in you today, if you felt a shift, even a small one, in how you see yourself or the world around you, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to hit that like button. It helps this content reach others who are searching for peace, who are ready to learn a different way. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We're here every single day, exploring A Course in Miracles together, going deep into these teachings that have the power to transform everything. You don't have to walk this path alone. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You know who they are. The person who's been trapped in self-judgment, who's exhausted from the ego's constant criticism, who's ready for a different way of seeing. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, what's one area of your life where you're ready to choose the Holy Spirit's judgment instead of the ego's? Where are you ready to see innocence instead of guilt? I read every comment, and your insights help build this community of people committed to awakening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to learn, to grow, to choose peace over fear. I'll see you tomorrow with more from the Course. Until then, remember, you are loved, you are innocent, and the truth about you has never changed.